Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me this week are Marcus Tilson, Sales Director at Root Sciences, and Stephen Brewster, Director of Products and R&D. How are you guys doing this week?
Good, thank you.
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Excellent. Well, before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. Finally, you can also, if you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com. All right. After the stumble there, I always like to start with how you guys got into the cannabis industry. So, Marcus, I'll start with you. What was your first step into cannabis?
By accident, actually. I come from a background of medical devices, been in there for over a decade, and I just wanted something different. And I actually moved the family out to the Northwest where Root Sciences is located here in Washington. And just stumbled into it by accident. Not intentional at all, but it's been really interesting and quite an eye-opener.
What was the accident? How'd you stumble in?
Just looking for jobs in my area. I knew where I didn't want to be, and I knew where I wanted to be, and these guys were located right where I wanted to be. And importantly, they were something completely outside the medical device field, which was one of the aims after being in there for over a decade. Wanted to do something totally different. And when I came across this, it seemed totally different and in the right area. So that was it. Simple.
I can't imagine many industries further from cannabis than medical device.
But that was kind of the aim. I mean, I'd had my fair share of medical devices, and I'd had enough of dealing with FDA, and I really wanted something that was as close to a full 180 as I could find. And this certainly ticked that box.
Stephen, how about yourself? Looking to get out of the medical device game as well?
No, so I had a very different history. So shortly after graduating from the University of Oklahoma with a degree in biochemistry, I was studying for the biochemistry GRE when I met somebody that was creating a startup up in Washington State that was going to be building a state licensed extraction laboratory and an indoor grow, and they desperately needed somebody to handle kind of the sciencey sides of things for them. So they brought me on, and I had the great eye-opening experience of helping them design and build indoor grow and processing facility from the ground up, where I spent the next 3 years working for them and learning a lot about different extraction techniques and really getting my hands wet. But at that stage of the game, it was still kind of early, and a lot of the knowledge was sequestered and isolated. So I started looking for a job where I could really get out into the world of cannabis extraction and kind of learn more firsthand from other people. When I stumbled upon the job offering from Root Sciences to be an installation technician, I jumped at it. And it's been a really wonderful experience. I've been with Root Sciences for a little over 4 years now. I started off just installing their famous VTA white film molecular distillation machines, where I've done easily over 100 installations of these units all over the world, from Thailand to Canada to many installs in the U.S. and from East to West Coast. So it's been really interesting, learning a lot about best practices and different techniques. Since then, my input with the company has kind of earned me multiple promotions, and we all wear many hats, but it's been a wild ride, and I love it.
I hear that often in the cannabis industry. We wear many hats. What is Root Sciences?
So we are an equipment distributor, first and foremost, for processing equipment. And we provide an end-to-end line of equipment. So the aim is, if you need anything to do with processing, specifically an entire processing lab, we can come in and we can do everything that you're going to need to get you right from your crude oil through to your finished products, effectively. And we can also even help out with the packaging side now. The common thread that runs through the products that we choose to distribute is that they are typically best in class for whatever sector they're in. So we don't have much duplication. We pretty much stick with one supplier for each area that we're aiming to get into. And we'll vet a number of contenders very seriously. And of course, Stephen's now part of that process. And we aim to provide just generally the highest quality, but still with at a reasonable price point. And that's why we have a variety of German suppliers, for example. Of course, they're well known for their high quality engineering. And we have a variety of other suppliers, both domestic here in the US and other specifically European suppliers as well. We try and maintain an agnostic viewpoint when it comes to technologies. So we will aim to carry any technology that we think has a place in the sector. For example, on the extraction side, we carry, of course, cryoethanol, that was our first one, but we also have hydrocarbon with ETS. We have CO2 with IES, and very soon we're going to have Whistler Tech as well for the solventless side. So we think that being able to maintain that agnostic view means that, and we hope that we're coming across as not trying to push people into any one thing just because that's what we sell it, but rather provide the best setup for what it is that they actually require for whatever products they're trying to produce. And we have a large amount of internal knowledge, not just Stephen. We have more of him as well, and that we think also adds to our prestige and our place in this marketplace. So we actually the company came out of a grow operation, which began in 2013 here in Washington, just down the road from where our offices are. And in 2016, Root Sciences came about because we had experimented with a VTA distillation unit at our grow operation and found that it was far superior to anything on the market. And we had worked with VTA, who were already a decades-old established supplier in the petrochemical and other industries for distillation equipment. We worked with them to tailor the equipment for the cannabis industry. And it was, as I said, far and away better than anything on the market at that time. So Root Sciences came out of that in order to be able to distribute just the VTA equipment in the US and then eventually globally as well. And then that's sort of the blueprint that we've followed since the start. So typically we'll find existing suppliers, oftentimes outside the cannabis industry, work with those suppliers to really hone that equipment for use in the cannabis and hemp sectors. And then we go out and sell it. And, we've broadened our equipment range now from just the distillation equipment from VTA out to, as I said, the full end-to-end solution. We can now supply complete labs, regardless of which extracting technology customers are interested in, right through to whatever products it is that they want to end up manufacturing.
Why do you look for suppliers outside of the cannabis industry, and what is that vetting process like?
Yeah, great question. So the main reason is because we're looking for established quality, and it's very hard to find that in such a nascent industry. So very easy to find that, of course, in many of the other industrial avenues that we've explored, especially distillation and extraction. These are very old techniques. The basis for all of the systems that we sell and our competitors sell, frankly, the basis for those is decades old. And when we want to know that somebody has a track history of solid R&D, high quality engineering, has everything sourced correctly, perhaps also is able to work in the GMP area, because that's something that's very difficult for newer, younger companies. There's a lot of legwork that goes into proper GMP. And a lot of our suppliers, especially our German ones, have already been doing that for decades as well. So it really just gives us that jump start into the higher echelons of the cannabis industry when we pull something that already has such a solid history behind it. And to answer the second part of your question, the vetting process. So we will typically shortlist a number of suppliers, and then, of course, we'll meet with them, test their equipment in various different ways. Stephen's big on that, being the director of R&D and products. Of course, he has a hand in all of that, but it's a lengthy process.
Stephen, what is the testing process like?
So it varies based on the equipment and what its function is. A lot of what goes into this work involves significant market research prior to even reaching out to these companies. And so, just because a product does a very good job doesn't mean that it's going to be viable, especially in the cannabis space. Take, for example, the nano emulsification equipment. There are companies out there that sell very, very nice, expensive, high pressure homogenization units that are just at a price point that is incongruous with the realities of cannabis and hemp processing in North America. And so it's not only does a piece of equipment need to fit the bill from a technical perspective, but from a business perspective as well, it needs to be a viable product in the industry. And so after we've kind of established that short list and we reach out to people, these larger companies, one of the great things about working with them is that they often have demo units where they will let us use a demo unit for a couple months at basically no charge. And so we're able to utilize our existing 502 cannabis license here in Washington State to fast track some of those products, actually use the equipment ourselves, and then do a variety of testing on the product to ensure that it meets all of the requirements for the application.
What is that back and forth like with the potential partner in terms of capabilities that you need to add to the machine and tweaks that need to be made to suit the cannabis market? Just because we've heard some horror stories of people going outside of the cannabis market to try and bring a technology in that really isn't fit for the application.
Yeah, absolutely. And that can definitely happen. We've had a couple suppliers that after having some interaction with, we ended up kind of backing out because it just wasn't going to be a good fit. And so one of the great things about doing that R&D is that you very quickly get a pretty clear image of what the relationship would be like moving forward. So it's a great kind of sneak peek and to what it would be like to work with them in longer term. So it can be difficult, but that's part of the process of really picking the right company to work with. Is A, making sure that they're hungry, and B, that they're willing to adapt their technology to the needs of our very specific application.
Marcus, at what point of the process are people coming to you for your services? Is it they're looking to add a line? Is it a completely new building? Is it people that have tried it on their own and failed? Kind of a mix of everything. At what point are people? Oh, go ahead.
It's in all of the above. So especially from the old days, when we started in 2016, we were solely distillation. So we became synonymous with VTA distillation in the cannabis space. And in those days, people were just coming to us for distillation equipment, whether it was a new piece or to add on to an existing piece that they already had, solely distillation. Last few years, since we've broadened that range so much, we're now attracting a very different array of customers, both domestically and internationally. And it still runs the gamut. So it might be somebody still just looking for some quality VTA distillation equipment, or it might be somebody that hasn't even begun their building yet, and they want help with everything. They want to know which equipment they need. Maybe all they have in mind is the products that they want to make. And so we'll help them with the equipment selection. We'll help them with layouts, help them with the building itself. We can really now do a much more broader range than we used to be able to do. And that includes consultancy on a range of things that come before you're even ready to put in any of that equipment in place.
Cannabis business real estate can be challenging to find and procuring, and then you sort of are stuck with the footprints to fit your operations in. Is that a challenge that you run into quite often? And do you ever have to tell somebody like, hey, you just can't do this here?
Yes, actually, we've had to do exactly that. Oftentimes, we can get away with it by knocking down walls and perhaps adding things on. But you hit the nail on the head there. It's so much easier when we're dealing with a new build. So much, because one of the other problems that comes with the existing buildings is oftentimes, of course, customers want to use any existing ancillary or steam or air or these sorts of things, which that adds a whole nother layer now to seeing if that's going to be compatible with the equipment we're suggesting, or perhaps we change our equipment recommendations based on what is available. Those sorts of things where we're making modifications that we otherwise wouldn't have to in a brand new build. So certainly more challenging, but it can be done.
About how long is the process from start to finish? Are we talking weeks, months between drawing up plans to turning the line on?
So that also runs the gamut. And it's very much, we don't have in-house architects, for example. So, there are parts that we're working with customers' architects, we're working with their engineers. And we have seen people who are, they just have all their ducks in a row and they might be ready to go within, let's say, 3 months of initiating a project. That would be quick. But we have also had customers 2+ years, and we've had multiple customers in that range as well. So that also really does run the gamut.
Stephen, you've been a part of, you said more than 100 installations. What was the most challenging one that you were on?
There's many ways in which an installation can be challenging, whether it be issues with having the equipment arrive on time, having the necessary utilities to run. One of my favorites has to be an installation where it was in an enclosed space with no ventilation and no air conditioning, where the room quickly reached over 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And some of the heaters and chillers on the unit started to no longer function, and they would error out and say they were overheating. So it's kind of hard in my mind to top the sweaty install that was quite hot.
Right. Do you just book an open-ended ticket and then realize, I'm going to be here for some time?
The truth is that, despite our best efforts, there's no way to guarantee that the client's going to be 100% ready for an install. And so, the key is to very clearly set out what the timeline and expectations well in advance, so that they have time to prepare for that and that they understand it. They have time to, come back and read your email a month later and then suddenly ask you a bunch of questions and still have time to take action based on your responses. But also to just have the experience and capability to deal with whatever gets thrown your way. You just have to have that tenacity where you're going to get the job done.
Do you have a preferred extraction method?
Personally, it's very hard to beat cold hydrocarbon when it comes to quality of preserving terpenes and the variety of extracts that you can produce with it, assuming that we're talking, of course, about cannabis, not hemp.
Okay. When new equipment launches, when you see new tech kind of come out, because it is a nascent industry, but we've had a fair amount of development coming out the last 10 or so years. As you see new developments come out, do you just sort of keep an eye on it for a while? Do you bring it in-house to kind of investigate it on your own? How do you determine whether or not you're going to move into a new product category?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there has been a lot of really unique thought in the cannabis processing space. That's one of my favorite parts about this industry, is that it keeps you on your toes. There's always something new, some big new idea somebody has. And the truth is that it really depends. Luckily, I have my formal training as a biochemist to kind of fall back on. And so oftentimes I'm able to evaluate what I think the potential of a certain technique is just off the bat, whether it's looking at it just immediately or digging a little deeper and trying to find some scientific articles with using a similar technique on different substrates. Usually you can kind of characterize whether or not something's got legs on it pretty quickly. And if it does, you have to move quickly in this industry. It's not a huge industry. There's only a handful of players, and being able to get first to market with a successful product is a big deal when it comes to successful product launches and marketing.
What is the typical size of your client? Are you primarily working with MSOs, or are you working with some small mom and pop shops as well?
Just the other week, I was in a small but really skillfully ran operation that was 2 people in one of those little rental warehouses up in northern Washington, making rosin and creating solventless nanoemulsions that are used to create like otter pop frozen popsicles, which I think is just an amazing idea. I love it. And so, it really runs the gamut between not only multi-state operators, but international operators as well. A number of the big Canadian LPs are clients of ours, to these small mom and pop operations. And, with my roots in kind of small business, I appreciate them all very equally.
When you're dealing state to state and then on an international level, Canada and elsewhere, how do you guys stay on top of the regulations for that specific location?
That can be difficult. Typically, we actually rely on the customer themselves because they're the one that's going to be in touch with their local jurisdiction, whether that's the fire side or the electrical side. So we stay outside of that and we just say, whatever it is that they require, we can typically adapt to, whether that's a different electrical supply, C versus UL, electrical specification, or testing rather, and then a variety of other things as well. We can often customize where needed, but we typically like to leave that up to the customer so that they know exactly what they are dealing with.
Yeah, because the truth is that there's regulation and there's enforcement, and the two don't always agree with each other in either direction. Sometimes things are under enforced, sometimes they're over enforced. So it really is down to the fire marshal that's inspecting your building, whoever your compliance officer is. So we're able to provide some sort of insight as to what's typical for clients in your area, but it does absolutely depend on specifically who is going to be looking over your shoulders.
What can operators do to make sure they set themselves up for success when it comes to that? Is it just being proactive, building a relationship with the fire marshal?
Yeah, there's absolutely like a list of best practices. Part of what's so excellent about working with the partners that we work with, such as ETS, is that they all have many, many years of experience doing exactly what we do. And so they're able to provide insight based on many different installations of equipment that they've done. So the best case scenario is always starting from the ground up, where they don't already have a plan for their building, and we're not trying to force 800 gallons of flammable solvent into a small closet, so that we can follow these best practices from the beginning.
We have a lot of knowledge on the installation team that we have as well. So, they're cumulative years. I mean, there's a ton of experience to draw from there, which often helps out, at least get the customers started with their locals.
Stephen, you had mentioned a small 2-person operation that you were recently working with. Clients large and small, which ones are easier to work with throughout the process?
I mean, it can go either way. Just because you have a lot of employees doesn't mean that you're paying attention to details, and just because you're a small operation doesn't mean that you don't demand the most out of the people you do business with. So it's hard to attribute something like that to its size.
I think large and small, it more comes down to, if having at least one person that's really driving things. Certainly on the sales side, maybe, I don't know, the same on the tech side, but at least getting the ball rolling and having somebody that's really managing the project from their end, whether they're a small company or a large company, makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I guess a lot of it comes down to communication, and that can be one of the difficulties with either small or large. Is too many cooks sometimes spoil the soup.
Is capital a big concern for most of your clients? Is that difficult for them to raise the capital to bring the equipment in-house?
That has fluctuated, I guess, over the years. Certainly, if you were to look over the last 3 years and say where we are right now, I think capital is historically harder to come by now than it was certainly in 2018, for example. But there's still capital out there. We're still having inquiries as we've ever had, at least in the last several years. And we still have plenty of people buying equipment. So capital's still there. There are now better leasing options available as well, of course. And the fast and loose money from 2018 is all but gone, but there are now still serious candidates still looking for funding opportunities.
How would you guys describe the current state of processing facilities, cannabis processing facilities in the United States?
So, I mean, it depends if we're lumping hemp in there or not. I would definitely say, widely varied. I've done installations in, what appeared to be a residential garage, and I've done installations in like class 4 clean rooms. So, it really runs the gamut, so to speak. But we definitely see a shift towards professionalism. A lot of the inquiries that we get these days have a focus on good manufacturing practices. And I think that shows in clients' facilities and their processes as well.
You had mentioned your work with equipment manufacturers. When you work with a client to develop kind of an entirely new product line for a new industry, do you have exclusivity to sell that into cannabis, or is that something that your manufacturing partner will then also sell independently to the cannabis industry?
We have both options. So some of our suppliers, we are exclusive. Some of our suppliers or their parent companies also want to be at arm's length from cannabis. Especially, US is at the forefront of this industry. Europe is lagging behind. So a lot of our European suppliers are not so comfortable dealing directly with cannabis. And that's where we can come in because we give them that arm's length. But we will oftentimes still have an exclusive distributorship in those cases. But then we have other product lines where both the manufacturer and other distributors are carrying that product. Typically, when it's products like that, not in every case, but for a lot of the cases, it's because it's smaller equipment that we might be using, to supplement some of the larger equipment that we're selling. Most of our larger equipment is done on an exclusive or semi-exclusive basis, but we have all sorts.
Have you ever thought, man, we could make this easier ourselves?
Yeah, in theory, we we like to think that, and then even if we take the briefest of dives into what that would involve, we realize it's a Herculean task, especially with the variety of equipment that we now have. You got to remember when we're going for this quality equipment, and these guys have these decades behind them. That is decades that they've been honing their craft, improving their production facilities, improving their engineering facilities. You can't do that stuff overnight. And sometimes we think it would be nice. It would be great to have a production facility, but even competing with one of the brands that we carry would be difficult, let alone supplement all of that. There's just so much that goes into it.
What kind of, after an install is completed, what kind of training and support do you guys offer to help make sure everything's running smoothly after you leave?
So that's one of the points that we pride ourselves on is our customer service. Although we are an equipment distribution company, I like to think of ourselves as a service company first, whether that's before the sale or after the sale. Training is very meticulous. Not only do we provide well-written, maybe a little bit too verbose SOPs for everything from the operation to maintenance and troubleshooting on every piece of equipment, but we provide in-person training, or at least the option for that, on all of our equipment as well. If it's not me doing the install, then we have a number of other highly qualified technicians that have similar backstories as to me that would perform the installation. And after the fact, not only do we have a technical support line, but oftentimes the installers exchange personal cell phone numbers with the end user that's actually operating the equipment. And we've formed some pretty fun friendships that way.
After, as you moved up the company, Stephen, do you miss being on the road at those installs?
I would say yes, but I'm still on the road quite often.
It also depends on which day you ask him.
Yeah. Maybe
Okay.
the day I'm flying, I would say, oh, I wish I was back in the office. But, I'd lie if I said that I don't enjoy the travel.
Do you ever run into people that have misconceptions over safety concerns over the equipment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any process can be dangerous, whether it's hydrocarbon extraction, CO2 extraction, or anything. A lot of hazard comes from not setting up the facility in a way that is safe to be using the equipment, and then how the equipment is being used. The education of our clientele is one of the most important things when we go to an install, because at the end of the day, that onus for safety is on the installer to ensure that they are properly trained and that they understand the hazards associated with each and every piece of equipment.
We had mentioned some of the emerging tech a bit earlier. Is there anything in particular that you have your eyes on?
Yeah, actually, we're just sort of ramping up release on a really cool new product. It's a terpene extractor. It's called the STX90. We're sort of doing a little bit of a soft launch with it right now. just as we ramp up. We've only sold a couple. We're going to have a big launch for it at MJ Biz. And it's unique in the marketplace and extremely effective. Steven's a bit of a specialist on this product, so I'll let him add some info in there.
Yeah, so the solventless terpene extractor utilizes what I like to refer to as direct distillation technology. So we use a vacuum to literally evaporate the most volatile components straight off the biomass. These are collected on a liquid nitrogen cold trap where they can be collected after the extraction cycle is complete. Part of what's so great about this is that what it extracts is the most volatile terpenes. So the mono and sesquiterpenes from the plant material, which is the exact components that give each strain its specific smell. When you go to pick up a piece of cannabis and smell it, that odor is exactly what this machine extracts. It's also really unique in that it produces what we call a terpene isolate because it is over 99% terpenes. There's no cannabinoids that come through in this process, and all we have to do is separate it from a little bit of water. Although people often say that there's no such thing as a free lunch, we feel like this is the
exception
to that rule. So it's ideally suited to be paired with other extraction techniques like cold ethanol, where really you don't have a means of harvesting a very nice fresh terpene fraction. So the biomass can go through this terpene extraction process and then be immediately ready to go into the cold ethanol extraction with pretty much no downside at all.
Was the solventless terpene extractor, is that a product that you developed with a partner, or is that something that you saw in the market and brought in?
It's actually kind of halfway between the two. So it's manufactured by Tandem Technology. They, again, much like the blueprint for a lot of our other industries, they're very well established in semiconductor manufacturing. And this is sort of an offshoot of that for them. And they sort of started playing around with this several years ago, but didn't really pursue it in any great length. I guess they're not part of the cannabis sector. It was a little bit hard for them to market. So we sort of teamed up with them both to be the marketing muscle, but also to provide a bit of feedback on what we thought could be good alterations and improvements for the machine. And we've been doing that over the last year or so. And as I said, we're now just beginning the soft launch for that right now.
Do you have any other product lines or technologies that you'd like to add to the portfolio?
Let's ask our director of products and R&D.
Well, our next pursuit is definitely solventless extraction with Whistler Technologies. That's pretty well-rounded. I mean, our complete lineup is everything from terpene extraction to CO2, hydrocarbon, cold ethanol, soon to be solventless extraction, gamut of winterization and post-processing techniques, including membrane nanofiltration, so as well as crystallization, chromatography, pretty much any sort of technique that's needed by one of our clients is something that we aim to provide.
Really let us bag there, did you, Steven?
Oh, and animal emulsification, of course.
From a regulatory side of the business, how closely do you keep an eye on states that might or are looking like they're going to turn legal and then trying to get a footprint into that state?
Yeah, that's something that's pretty important for us. We always keep that on the radar. The reality is, though, is it can be, as much as we try and hit the ground running, it often takes a bit of a period for that state to actually come online. So there is a definite delay most of the time. Of course, it does depend on the state's regulations because those differ enormously and therefore differ as to how the process plays out. But yes, always on the radar for us.
What are your expectations for federal legalization, and how might that impact the way that Root Sciences does business?
It's a tricky one. I mean, I think it has to be federally legal at some point. The question is, how far in the future is that? The political climate right now, of course, is not fantastic. Although you could argue that one of the few areas of bipartisanship right now, perhaps, is, an admission that this patchwork is a little bit strange. At the very least, we should hopefully be seeing some legalization on the banking side to at least improve what is a very broken system right now. Yeah, I wouldn't want to put a date on anything because, anytime you get too hopeful about it, that gets blown out of the water and we wait for another election cycle to pass by. But I'm sort of cautiously optimistic that things will start happening in the next few years. But we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, this is always a very interesting question to me because I feel like you can tell who is in the cannabis industry and who's kind of on the other side. A lot of the public seems to think that federal legalization suddenly means that everything's better for consumers, which is not going to be the case, at least not straight away. There's going to be a huge tumultuous period of massive change that happens when federal legalization occurs. And so, I, like most cannabis companies, am hoping that it's a long and drawn out process where they actually listen to the feedback from the industry and not just lobbyists with deep pockets.
Yeah, and I mean the problem is that a lot of what Stephen just referred to is quite likely to happen, right? Huge amount of consolidation would probably happen. Your smaller outfits would struggle most likely. So hopefully they can do it in a slower, maybe somewhat protective rollout. But who knows? Those lobbyists, they often throw a spanner in the works with that sort of thing.
And your locally grown weed would likely be a thing of the past. We'd very quickly see consolidation of the supply chain with just a handful of couple thousand acre farms in California or maybe even internationally.
Mm-hmm. No, it's I hear that. I mean, I hear that often from people where it's like, it's not going to be all, sunshine and roses. It's, I mean, when, although, you can hold out hope that the government, maybe this one time, just get everything right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess the other side of that too is that the closest corollary is probably the beer market, right?
Yeah.
And we do have craft brewers coexisting with the massive breweries. So
we do now.
It
wasn't always that
no,
way. There was a huge decrease in the number of active breweries when
when the big ones took over.
Yeah.
This is true. So but maybe there's hope there.
And so part of what I always make sure to preach to the people that I train is that quality. At the end of the day, all you have is the quality of your product to stand behind. People used to think years ago that they'd get acquired by some large company to get their facility or their extraction equipment or their IP. The reality is, when it comes to big industry, it's all chump change. Like your state-of-the-art manufacturing facility that costs you $10 million fully turnkey, it's not a lot of money in large industries. So at the end of the day, your brand is what you're building, and that is what the value is. The quality of your product has to be the utmost concern.
I see that a lot. And I see that a lot in this industry, though. People that are very carefully curating both their brand and the quality of their product. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. Like that's the only move these days. That's the long-term play, is to build your consumer base and the power of your brand.
Do either of you have a personal connection that brought you to the industry?
None whatsoever.
I mean, personal fascination, absolutely. In terms of like a personal connection, interpersonally, I would not.
Okay. Is there anything in particular that you want to make sure the Cannabis Equipment News audience knows about Root Sciences?
Ooh. No, I mean, I think we've touched on it. The main thing that we're trying to change people's viewpoints on now is we are a relatively established brand in the cannabis market. But like I said, we were exclusively known for VTA distillation equipment. So the big news now is that that's no longer us. We are now end to end. We provide anything you need for the processing environment and even after that.
And I would just add that, one of the mantras that I try to abide by is to always be helpful and to be giving the client the best chance of success. There have been a number of times that I've told people that, we're not going to be able to sell you what you really need, but if I were you, I'd be looking at these other companies. Even if it's a product that we sell, it's just not a great fit for them. At the end of the day, we try to do best by the client. And so whatever your needs are, reach out and we're happy to have a conversation with you.
You mentioned MJ Biz. What are your plans for the show in November?
Yep. So we'll be there again this year, as we always are. We will be pushing that end-to-end message. So in addition to having our big seller at the moment on the distillation side, which is our VKS 95, we're also going to have a variety of other equipment as well. And that includes obviously the STX 90, which we'll be seeing as essentially the main launch for that piece of equipment. But we'll have a good crew down there. We're going to have some of our other suppliers too. We're going to have some nano-emulsification equipment there. We might have some solventless equipment, solventless extraction equipment as well. But we're going to have almost all of the sales crew, a big portion of the tech crew. A lot of our management's going to be down there. So we hope to see as many customers and new faces as we can.
Excellent. Well, our editorial staff will be down there as well in November, so I hope we get a chance to catch up.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, finally, I always like to ask, what's the best way for CEN listeners, viewers, readers to get in touch or get a little bit more information if they're curious?
Yeah, rootsciences.com, obviously the best place to start. We have Instagram as well, which is Root Sciences. And they can get us directly on the phone from the website. You know, we don't hide behind the veil of contact forms. If they don't want to use those, they're more than welcome to just pick up the phone and call us, and we can help them out however they like.
We've got lots of beautiful brochures available for download on the website. So if there's anything that catches your eye, it's easy to get more information right away.
Yep.
I'm not a sucker for anything more than a beautiful brochure.
Hey, we have plenty.
Excellent. Well, thank you both very much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, David.
Thank you, David.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. Finally, if you want to email the podcast, you can email me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com. All right. From Marcus Tilson and Stephen Brewster, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast, and we'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.